old school. It's been a year since we went from the Zoom to the room for the boom. I don't know if anyone remembers that. That was my best line ever. It was a singular presentation and I made a lot of claims that day. Did a bit of bribing as well, gave out some prizes. We're going to do that again today. One of the claims that I made, I think one or two of you tried to pull me up on it afterwards, was the great migration of the Sydney, Melbourne, Brisbane, Adelaide, Perth workforce to regional locations, and quite a few of you told me that was all going to cycle its way back, and that just didn't happen. And I thought that today, given that the ABS last year showed that regional population growth is outpacing, its trends, to the largest extent in the last 4 decades, it might be worthwhile just coming back and revisiting a little bit of the dynamics around what's happening in regional markets, and we would do that through a tourism lens, I reckon, would be a great way to do that. So we've gotten a terrific panel together to unpack this, and I'd like to welcome Penny Davey-White, the founder of Tilt Agency, which is a Canberra-based agency. I'd like to welcome Dr. Isaac Mizrachi, who is heading up as Senior Director of Marketing for Visit Canberra. And I'd like to welcome also Belinda McPherson, who's Executive General Manager for Regional at News Corporation, based up there on the Gold Coast. And we're going to sort of unpack a little bit about the dynamics around what's happening with the market at the moment. So I might just start with you, Isaac. What I'm seeing in the market at the moment is a massive amount of interest in domestic tourism. That's obviously translating very well for regional economies because we're obviously a fairly major destination in that respect. I think there's consumers making choices about whether they travel domestically or travel internationally and where they go. And I hear that you are just about to launch a new campaign to sort of stake your claim for a fair share of the market.
That's right, yeah. In 2 weeks' time, actually, and many of the media in the room will take part in that campaign. So first and foremost, thank you for joining us on this big experience. Big campaign. Going one step back, I guess it all emerges from the challenges Canberra is facing as a travel destination. There are many challenges. If I'll mention just the main two, as you said, strong competition for domestic travelers. The situation is that all destinations basically fight for the same pool of people, and when your competition is Sydney, Melbourne, Queensland, their budgets are so much higher than ours. We have to work with a very modest budget. Our resources are limited, so it's harder to cut through the noise. Second challenge is that Canberra still suffers from negative perceptions, I guess, among many Australians. And that's a shame because it's such a great travel destination. There's so much to see and do. And with this new campaign, we try to address these challenges. So first, we try to stay away from what other state tourism offices are doing. Our creative is taking a completely different approach. So think about any typical domestic destination campaign or global one. It's all about the beautiful vistas and the landscapes and sunsets and gorgeous models. We take it to a different direction. We focus on people, on real-life Canberrans, and we bring in a bit of humor. So we prefer not to take ourselves too serious with this campaign, just to be a bit light and fun. We're trying to say that the reason you didn't hear about Canberra as a destination is because the people are so humble and they don't like to brag about the city and to show off and so on. So that's, I guess, the direction we're taking, and hopefully it will give Canberra a bit of a personality. So you think of Sydney, you think of Melbourne, you immediately see something, you see a face to the city. With Canberra, when you think about it, what do you see? Parliament House. I mean, we try to change that with focusing on people, and fingers crossed, we'll make it happen.
Oh, we're pretty proud of our Parliament House as well, but sometimes I think taking 100%. The politicians out of the story might be a good thing for you. Penny, you're executing on this, and it's a major piece of work, and it's national. Can you talk about some of the challenges that you're having, or how you see the opportunity in the media landscape, and how you've managed to get this away?
Thanks, Brian. Hopefully that's working. I guess, as Isaac said right from the forefront, I'm used to having very big budgets and now we have very small budgets. So our relationships with a number of you in this room have been imperative to us to really try and stand out. I think the other thing for us is, as Isaac said, we're all doing the same thing. So we're all trying to attract you to go to, be it Orange, Mudgee, Gold Coast, Noosa, wherever it is. It's how do we have a unique proposition and how do we actually leverage our media to really truly tell that story and also identify who's more likely to consider it. We're not actually saying come to Canberra for a week's holiday. We're actually saying come for a weekend. You know what? We have so much to offer. Then we were talking outside of all of us are loving the Orange and we don't dish our New South Wales country counterparts because actually we're all trying to do the same thing. But actually, if you think of the family friendliness of Canberra, we've got a lot to offer for full family. Plus, we've got a lot, amazing restaurants, great galleries, great vineyards. So, you know, it's getting you out of that thought of Canberra is just politicians and roundabouts. And we always come back to, in fact, I had a meeting with a client yesterday and they said, you're so right. All I can think of is my first school trip to Parliament House and I've never been back. And that's probably one of our biggest challenges. But I'm going to add one more thing. We don't just market to Metro. So we really look at that 3 to 4 hour drive and we actually really try and think of how can we entice them. We're an affordable city to come visit. So if you do live in Wagga, that is equally as important to us as Sydney. So we really do look at what are the markets that we're more likely to attract, just not where the numbers are.
And are you finding that, from your perspective, from a planning perspective, that you've got a reasonable sort of spread of tools that cover all the markets, or is there a challenge there?
I think we'd all agree in the room. Look, one of our challenges always, we were talking data earlier, unfortunately for regional, it is hard for us, and I think if you're based in Sydney, as I was for 25 years, you can very easily fall into, well, what does Roy Morgan tell me and therefore that's all I need? And now when we look at the advent of our Google programmatic platforms, etc., Facebook, it's very easy to say, well, it's cheap CPMs and I can get my reach there. The challenge is trying to actually really unpack that data by market, to actually really think about who are we trying to attract and what channels exist that we may not have data on Roy Morgan. You know, I'm a big believer that there's a role for all media. It really comes down to who's right for us, who's the audience, what are they consuming, but equally what is the user experience in that market? You know, I think I can say, you know, I'm not a huge fan of Facebook, but we use it because you have to. But actually, I think that, you know, we're talking as an industry, it now is about attention and engagement. It's not just cheap impressions. And I think that's really important when we're choosing the channels that we are using to try and connect, and hopefully we'll convince you all you're going to come to Canberra for a weekend.
Those connections are really important, and I think the media's got a role to play there, Bill, because you know, obviously content and local content and building content around communities is really important, and you're leading the charge there.
Yeah, BG, I mean, I use a term, I mean, I think everyone's heard of the term glue days, you know, where you bring your team into the office to collaborate, to work together and to connect. If you think about these communities, the regional media in those communities are the glue days. It's what brings people together. It's how we connect. It's how we communicate with each other. It's how we share stories and feel a sense of place. I was in Townsville last week and I walked down to the coffee shop with the local editor there, Craig, and we had no less than 6 people stop us on the way to the coffee shop, and they all had an interest in the content that we were talking about on that day. You know, one of them said to us, I heard you on the radio yesterday, Craig, you know, really great segment talking about health in Townsville, and really excited you've got the health minister coming to visit. You know, if there wasn't regional media in these markets, we wouldn't get outcomes like that. And, you know, getting the health minister into Townsville, which is in a shocking state right now, has 2 major hospitals, they don't work together, long waiting queues. So I think regional media plays a really important part, and we've seen time and time again when you take strong regional media out of a community, it suffers as a result. So, glue days, I'll leave you with that.
Thanks. So, thinking about, you've got a plethora of channels and platforms to sort of engage with, and I'm interested, Isaac, if you're thinking about your creative approach to, you've got a key theme about this creative, or putting the humour back into your messaging, and I'm wondering how are you going to sort of target messages to audience or platforms? Do you see an opportunity, or would you even consider changing your creative messaging for a metro versus a regional consumer, for example?
Good question. No, we treat everyone the same when it comes to messaging. We've been doing so previously, so it's not just about this campaign. The only one tiny element that we feel that our data tells us is different between metro visitors to regional is shopping. So we found out that many regional visitors to Canberra come to the city for the shopping experience, whereas Sydney, Melbourne, etc. don't really care about our shopping offerings, which I'm not sure why, but there you go. That's the only difference.
They're there for the food and the entertainment.
Yeah, there's so much other to see and do.
I was interested also, just following up with you, Bill, on the content side, the amount of your distribution of your company's material is, traditionally a print business, but the explosion in the way you guys are configuring to deliver to your local regional audiences in a digital formats is probably worth unpacking a little bit as well.
Yeah, look, I think you've probably heard a lot, and I haven't been in all the sessions this morning, but you've probably heard a lot about data, and I think increasingly journalism is led by data, believe it or not. So just like we've always used data and insights and research to plan for clients, our journalism, we are a subscription business. We've become a consumer business. So I spend a lot of my time thinking about the same things you do, how to get cut through with consumers. And we use data. Data is our primary source of getting that cut through from consumers. Our data and insights is second to none. In fact, we're about to probably start licensing it to other publishers globally. And that helps us make informed decisions about the content we produce, what we put in front and behind a paywall, what our audiences want to read and what they engage in. And we know down to the level of, what intent they're going to do on that day. So for us, content is critical, local content is critical, but data is what drives a lot of our approach now, and I think should be driving a lot of our content approach in any publisher.
100%. Penny, you're working with a range of different clients out of the Canberra market, and you've got a very big footprint that you're trying to reach for many of those clients. Have you had sort of situations where you've been able to sort of move the needle for the regional media companies in any way through that kind of data approach?
Sure. I guess one of the biggest changes I think we've made in the last 12 months for a client that's actually Sydney-based, it's a national client, was when we took over the business, they had this viewpoint, as a client does, of 75% of our sales come from the top corporations, and 80% of those businesses are based in Sydney and Melbourne, and therefore previous agencies and even the marketing team just assumed that our marketing would all lean in to those top two markets. And we actually said, give us your sales. Let's look at, what is the data telling us? And we went back to them and said, well, actually, did you know that 65% of your sales comes from regional markets? Even the client didn't realise. No, you're wrong, Penny. And they went back and re-looked at their data 3 times and said, well, hang on, how are you cutting it? But anyhow, we were right. And with that, we said, well, therefore, what we're doing needs to be very different from our media strategy. So we really need to be thinking about, which markets are they? So, again, good media planners, we tend to look at this. All of us exist because we want our clients to succeed. We're not doing it to make it easier by just buying national media. But really unpacking that data completely changed the channels we used, how we worked with media owners. And look, the end result at the end of the last year, they had their biggest year post-COVID that they've ever had. And their brand awareness went up from 66 to 82%. So I just, again, it all comes back to, yes, it's data, but it's really thinking about your client and equally what success looks like for them. It might be that those main corporations are in metro, but actually where's the business coming from? And I think that, it's our duty to actually do the right thing by our client and unpack it.
Yeah, I think that's terrific advice, because there's a question here I was going to ask, which was, what have our clients got to remember when they're sort of looking at engaging with regional markets? And it's, dig into the data is probably the key message that...
I can add one more to that.
Yeah.
I actually think the other thing is that marketers, agencies, we all think, and again, I've worked on a lot of big brands, as most of you know, and we can all look at it and say, well, Sydney's got 6 million plus population. But actually, if we come back to Canberra, I think we saw earlier from Gay's presentation of Canberra had the biggest use of digital media, right? Take Canberra, yes, I'll wear that hat today, but I'm representing all regional today. That, if you look at our Canberra makeup, we're actually the most educated with the highest disposable income, and actually our properties are second to Sydney. So we're a really expensive market. So yes, we're only a 450,000 population, but put your hat of ROI, do a campaign in Canberra, and guaranteed you'll get much more higher return on investment than you will in Sydney. So I think you need to go beyond just population and size as well.
Actually, I'm interested in your impressions on this one, Isaac, because you've come, to Canberra via Melbourne from Israel, and you're seeing a discussion taking place about the relative values between one population and another. And I'm interested in your perspective on that, because I doubt that you would have seen that in other places.
Honestly, to me, it's one big, beautiful country. I still don't understand the differences. I mean, the discussion about metro regional when it comes to media, obviously, it's deep and diverse, and I get that. But from the perspective of a destination marketer, to me, it's one big, beautiful destination, and that's our focus, really, just to sell this beautiful place called Australia.
Absolutely. I see you.
Yeah, I'd probably just like to remind everyone that a third of Australia's population lives in regional Australia, and yet, we've had a little bit of an increase since, Boomtown Collective has come together, which is unheard of in itself. All of us media players partnering together on outcomes for regional Australia. But, it's only about 14% of brands' investment. So there is an enormous untapped opportunity in regional Australia that as marketers, we should be far more aware of. If you have an online sales client, i.e. someone who is focused on e-commerce, 7 of the top 10 online sales postcodes by volume are in regional Australia. So I'll leave you with that.
That's almost a mic drop moment. So I think we're just about cruising towards time. So I think if we could sort of get from our panel some final sort of tips or watch outs for connecting with regional audiences, or any observations that you might have that we could wrap.
Do you want me to start? I've just got a funny story, actually, I want to share. We've all been playing around with ChatGTP, and so thinking about how that can play a part in journalism, and particularly regional journalism, where we're basically running on the smell of an oily rag, and we're trying to deliver really great content every single day. So we're having a bit of fun with it, and I just think this is a really pertinent story, given everything in the media at the moment is about AI. So we entered a news story we wrote in the NT News a few years ago about a gentleman who had a firecracker go off that burnt his nether regions. And we asked ChatGTP to write us a headline. I just think this is a bit funny, and I'm just going to get it up. Man suffers injuries after firecracker mishap in private area. So that's what ChatGTP wrote for us. The NT News that day ran with cracker up his clacker. So... it doesn't matter how much data is really core to where you start your planning, and AI will play a part in our future, but good journalism and a deep understanding of these communities is core, and the reason why regional media exists today and why it will continue to exist in the future.
And in one line, connect with your audiences.
Correct.
Well done, I like that. Isaac?
Probably no any further comments other than we are giving away a nice prize, and I'll let Penny mention it. Yeah, go ahead.
Sure, unless you've got anything
I guess I was just going to add before
more
I do that.
educative than that.
I think Belinda's right. Like, you know, I think with the theme today has been understand your audiences. I'd actually like to give a play to when you are thinking about regional markets, lift the hood from, just your metro reps. I think it's really good talking to those on the ground and really understanding, you know, what is the community? We all talk about user experience. The experience isn't the same for all markets, and we actually need to really think about what makes up that population. You know, an NT News is very different to the Canberra Times, right? So I think whilst we're talking one size fits all, it's not really. And I think you can get really great. One of the questions I did have in there was, you know, what's the opportunities for regional? What you find is our little regional reps do work really hard to try and convert some sales. And, you know, we're all about driving jobs for all markets, and I think it's a real opportunity for us to tap into those on the ground.
Absolutely.
And then you want me to do the other?
Oh, I'll circle back because I've got one as well, because statistically, the data is telling me that before this year is out, every single one of you is going to make your way through a regional market in some way, shape, or form. Including Canberra. Grab your, grab your listener app or your radio app or whatever it is, and make sure that you set your, interest towards listening to some of these and engaging with some of these radio stations and television stations and newspapers on the way through that journey. And you'll find really strong local connection, and you'll figure out pretty soon how to leverage that for your clients. But yes.
So to entice you all, thanks to Boomtown, have offered $500 weekend away to Canberra. I don't know if Ryan, you've got the mechanic.
Yeah, the mechanics. Now, we did this, I don't know if you recall last year, but the mechanics were a shit fight because, and let me explain why. It was because when I walked up to the lectern, I thought, ooh, it'd be good to give something away. So the mechanics were, pretty crap. So this year, we literally decided walking on the stage that we'd do this. So the mechanics once again will be total crap. So these are the rules. Only people who are following us on LinkedIn are eligible to enter. So that means get your mobile out, go on, follow us, the Boomtown page on LinkedIn. That's easy. And then flick us an email. What email address do you want? info@boomtown.media. Subject line, graft and corruption. And, I mean, prize. Kim, it wasn't that bad. She's completely appalled. And we will randomly draw one from a virtual box of some type tomorrow and let you know. That's how it's going to work. So it's a $500 gift which Isaac has very kindly put on the table for accommodation and meal, and Boomtown will add the flights down to Canberra.
What's the email again?
info@boomtownmedia. What? info@boomtown.media.
And actually, because you're based in Sydney, you can drive. It's only 3 hours.
There'll be a 12-year-old somewhere who can help us out with it. Thanks, Barra. Congratulations, panel. You've done an excellent job today, and thanks for helping us unpack, all the opportunity that's available to all of these fine people in regional Australia. Over to you, Sam.